I've been a nurse at Evergreen Memorial for 16 years. I've witnessed things that would make most people quit: cardiac arrests in hallways, families collapsing at bad news, the quiet dignity of terminal patients. But nothing in my career disturbed me like the patient in room 318. His name was Martin Keene. At least, that's what his chart said. He arrived through the ER after a minor car accident, concussion, whiplash, bruising. Nothing life-threatening. Standard protocol: 24-hour observation, discharge if stable. This happens dozens of times weekly. But Martin never left. Not because he couldn't. His injuries healed within days. Not because insurance denied him. His policy covered everything. Not because he had nowhere to go. His paperwork listed an address in Oak Ridge, the nice part of town. He simply stayed. At first, it was barely noticeable. Medical bureaucracy can be sluggish, discharge paperwork misplaced. Dr. Harmon, our attending, kept saying he'd handle it. Days became a week. A week became 2. "I'm just being thorough," Dr. Harmon would say when asked. "Something about his cognitive tests concerns me." But I administered those tests. Martin was sharp, articulate, completely oriented. His eyes tracked perfectly. His memory was intact. He could solve complex puzzles faster than I could. I first realized something was wrong when I came on shift and found Martin's bed made, not by housekeeping, but with hospital corners so precise they could have been measured with a ruler. His few personal items were arranged at perfect right angles. His water pitcher positioned exactly 1 inch from the edge. That evening, I watched him eat. He cut his bland hospital chicken into exactly 16 equal pieces. Chewed each piece exactly 12 times. Drank water in precisely timed intervals. "Martin," I finally asked, "don't you want to go home?" He looked at me with those clear blue eyes. "Not particularly, Ms. Abernathy." He always called me Ms. Abernathy, never Sarah, despite my invitations. "I find it peaceful here." "But your life," I gestured vaguely, meaning everything outside, "is on hold," he finished. "And I prefer it that way." Around the 3-week mark, I noticed other staff avoiding room 318. When I asked why, they'd shrug or make excuses. "He gives me the creeps," one aide admitted. "The way he watches everything." It was true. Martin observed everything: staff changes, medication schedules, hospital routines. He knew which ceiling tiles had water stains, which floor tiles had been recently replaced. He could tell you which nurses were dating which doctors, who was fighting with their spouse, who was struggling financially. He noticed things no patient should notice. One night during vitals checks he said, "Your landlord entered your apartment today." I froze, thermometer in hand. "Excuse me? While you were here? Working your double shift?" He smiled thinly. "Your cat was quite distressed." The tortoiseshell one. I'd never mentioned my cat to him. Never mentioned my apartment situation or my landlord's boundary issues. Never mentioned I was working a double. "How could you possibly know that?" My voice sounded distant. He closed his eyes. "I observe patterns, Ms. Abernathy. Humans are mostly patterns." I should have reported this, but to whom? For what? Being creepy isn't a psychiatric hold criterion. Having inexplicable knowledge isn't a crime. By week 4, strange things began happening on the floor. Equipment malfunctions. Missing medications. Patient records with unexplainable errors. One night, all monitors in the West Wing went offline simultaneously for exactly 3 minutes. When I returned after 2 days off, Martin said, "Your sister's baby has colic." My sister had just had her baby. The colic started the previous night. I hadn't told anyone at work. "Who are you?" I whispered. "Just a patient, Ms. Abernathy." That thin smile again. "Recovering nicely, don't you think?" I started documenting everything. Small disappearances, a security badge here, a key card there. Restricted doors found unlocked in the morning. Patient files appearing on different floors. And Martin, always in his room, always in bed when checked on, always with that thin smile. "What are you doing here?" I finally demanded one night, after finding him walking the halls at 3 a.m., something he'd never been caught doing before. "The same as everyone," he replied. "Gathering information? For what purpose?" His eyes seemed to look through me. "Hospitals are perfect ecosystems, Ms. Abernathy. Controlled environments. Documented routines. Vulnerable people. Trusted authorities." He gestured around the dimly lit corridor. "If you wanted to understand how a community functions, how it breaks, where better to study." I went to Dr. Harmon the next morning, insisting Martin be discharged or transferred to psychiatric. He listened patiently, then showed me Martin's file. "We can't discharge him, Sarah. Look at the signature." The admission form had been signed by Dr. Thomas Keene, Chief of Neurology at Meridian University Hospital, requesting continued observation of his brother for an unspecified neurological study. "But that's above our pay grade," Harmon finished. "Just do your job. The thing is, we don't have a chief of neurology named Keene." I checked. Meridian University Hospital doesn't exist. That night, I accessed the hospital database using Harmon's login. He never changes his password, and searched for any patient named Martin Keene. Nothing. I searched admission records for room 318 for the past month. Nothing. According to the system, room 318 had been empty since renovation 6 months ago. Yet I'd been taking vitals from Martin Keene in that room every day. I'd been administering non-existent medications to a non-existent patient in a non-existent room. And so had everyone else. When I arrived for my next shift, the ward clerk pulled me aside. Security came by. "Dr. Harmon's access has been revoked. Someone used his login to access restricted files." Her eyes narrowed. "They're reviewing the camera footage." I felt cold. When did this happen? Last night around 2 a.m. I had been home. Asleep. I hoped. I walked to room 318 with leaden feet. Martin was sitting up, reading a medical journal. "What did you do?" I whispered. "I protected the study, Ms. Abernathy." He didn't look up. "Contaminated variables must be eliminated." "What study? What variables?" Now he looked up, and his eyes were different somehow, flatter. "Do you know how many people die in hospitals from preventable errors each year, Ms. Abernathy?" "About 250,000. I answered automatically. "And if someone wanted to increase that number strategically? To observe how systems fail when stressed? How people respond to unexplainable events? How trust erodes?" He smoothed his blanket. "Room 318 has excellent sightlines to 3 nursing stations, 6 security cameras, and the main medication room." My mouth went dry. "Who are you?" "A patient," he said simply. "For now." That night, 3 patients coded simultaneously in different wings. All had received medication updates in the system. All updates traced back to Dr. Harmon's login. The next day, Dr. Harmon didn't come to work. When security went to his house, they found him confused, claiming he'd been home with the flu for a week. His keycard showed continuous use at the hospital during that time. I went to room 318. It was empty. Completely stripped. No sign anyone had been there. "Who was in this room?" I asked the charge nurse. She gave me an odd look. "No one. It's been closed for renovations." "Martin Keene," I insisted. "The patient with the concussion." She checked the computer. "We haven't had a Martin Keene. Are you feeling all right, Sarah?" "I'm not crazy. I know what I saw, what I documented. Except all my documentation is gone, notes deleted, medication records altered. Even the security footage shows me entering an empty room 318, talking to no one. Last night, I received a text from an unknown number. Patterns, Ms. Abernathy. Humans are mostly patterns. This morning, I found my tortoiseshell cat arranged on my kitchen floor. Dead. Cut into exactly 16 equal pieces. I'm writing this from a motel 30 miles away. I've called the police, but what can I tell them? That a patient who doesn't exist knew things he couldn't know. That hospital records changed themselves. That I'm being watched by someone who may not even be real. The motel has thin walls. A few minutes ago, I heard someone check into the room next door. Through the wall, I can hear him arranging his belongings at perfect right angles. The water running at precisely timed intervals. The patterns are continuing. And I'm part of them now. I used to believe I was saving them. That's what I told myself each time I falsified discharge papers, each time I disconnected in 4, each time I wheeled another patient through those automatic doors into the crisp night air. I was freeing them from the sterile prison of St. Catherine's Memorial Hospital. My name is Eleanor Webb. For 11 years I was the night shift charge nurse on the 3rd floor, oncology, infectious disease, and palliative care. The floor where patients came to die slowly, expensively, and alone. The first one was an accident. Mrs. Abrams, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, septic after her last round of experimental chemotherapy. She begged me to let her see the stars one more time. Just once. Her room faced the parking garage. "Please," she whispered through cracked lips. "I haven't seen the sky in 27 days. Hospital policy prohibited taking critical patients outside. But her monitors showed she had hours, maybe minutes left. What harm could it do? I disconnected her, wrapped her in blankets, and wheeled her to the staff garden on the roof. She didn't speak as I positioned her beneath the vast canopy of stars. She just cried silently, her thin chest barely moving. After an hour, she turned to me and said, "I'm ready to go home now." I assumed she meant back to her room. I was wrong. "Home," she repeated. "My apartment. I'm not dying in this place. Mrs. Abrams, you're in critical condition. You need. I know exactly what I need." Her eyes were suddenly clear, focused. "And it's not to die surrounded by beeping machines and strangers." I should have called security. Should have paged the resident on call. Instead, I looked at her chart again. No family contacts. No visitors in 3 weeks. DNR order in place. 2 hours later, I was using my own car to drive her to her small apartment 15 minutes from the hospital. I helped her into her own bed, surrounded by faded photographs, and the faint smell of the perfume she could no longer wear. "Thank you," she said, squeezing my hand with surprising strength. "Now I can go properly." I left her with morphine from our dispensary and my personal cell number. She never called. 3 days later, the hospital received notification of her death at home. The attending physician, Dr. Matthews, was puzzled. There was no record of her discharge, but in the chaos of an understaffed hospital, paperwork errors happen. The matter was logged for review and promptly forgotten. But I couldn't forget the look on Mrs. Abrams' face when she saw the stars. Or the peace in her voice when she thanked me. 2 weeks later, I did it again. Mr. Chin had been admitted with pneumonia complicated by his long-term HIV. The infection wasn't responding to treatment. His partner had died the previous year, and his estranged family wanted nothing to do with him. For 6 days he stared at the wall, refusing to eat. "They're just prolonging it," he told me during one midnight medication round. "I don't want more time. I want to see David again." His apartment was filled with books, thousands of them, carefully organized on handmade shelves. He asked me to help him to his reading chair, an ancient leather armchair positioned beneath a skylight. "This is where we used to read to each other," he said. "Every night for 14 years. I left him with the same supplies, pain medication, my number, and the promise I'd take responsibility if anything went wrong. He died within 48 hours. Again, the discharge paperwork mysteriously appeared, albeit with irregularities that were noted and ignored. After the third patient, a 33-year-old woman with terminal leukemia who wanted to die on the beach where her husband had proposed, I developed a system. I identified patients who were terminal, suffering, and alone. I created counterfeit discharge documents using Dr. Matthews' login credentials. I borrowed supplies from the pharmacy, small amounts that wouldn't trigger inventory flags. I used a service elevator that wasn't monitored by security cameras. In 9 months, I helped 27 patients escape the sterile confines of St. Catherine's and die on their own terms. Nobody noticed the pattern. Hospital administration was more concerned with insurance codes than patient dignity. Doctors were too overworked to track every terminal case. The system was broken, and I was exploiting its cracks. I kept a small notebook documenting each case. Names, dates, final wishes. Mrs. Abrams and her stars. Mr. Chun and his books. Sophia and her beach. Raymond, who wanted to hear live jazz one more time. Eleanor, who needed to say goodbye to her dog. 27 souls who deserved better than fluorescent lights and the antiseptic smell of approaching death. I didn't realize I was being watched until the night I tried to help patient 28. Marcus Beaumont, 42, end-stage liver failure from hepatitis. He'd been a surgeon once, before addiction destroyed his career. He wanted to die in the university library where he'd studied medicine 30 years earlier. I was disconnecting his monitors when Dr. Sawyer walked in, young, idealistic, new to our floor. She wasn't supposed to be there. Her shift had ended hours earlier. "What are you doing, Eleanor?" she asked, her eyes moving from the disconnected floor to the wheelchair I positioned by the bed. "Just moving him for comfort," I lied. "His back is sore from lying flat." "With discharge papers?" She held up the documents I'd left at the nurse's station. "With your car keys in your hand?" The room seemed to tilt slightly. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Her voice was ice. "You're killing these patients." "I'm giving them dignity," I hissed. "Something this place forgot about long ago." She stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "Do you know why I came back tonight? I was reviewing mortality data. Did you know St. Catherine's has an unusually high number of terminal patients who somehow make it home to die? All from this floor. All during your shifts." My skin went cold. I'd been so careful. "You need help, Eleanor. This isn't mercy. It's madness." I looked at Marcus, semi-conscious but watching us with glassy eyes. "Please," I whispered. "Let me take him. Just this once. Then I'll stop. I'll get help." Dr. Sawyer seemed to consider this, then slowly shook her head. "I can't be part of this." She reached for the door. "I'm calling security." I'm not sure what happened next. I remember the four-pole in my hands. The sound of metal connecting with flesh. Dr. Sawyer crumpling to the floor, a thin line of blood trailing from her hairline. Marcus watched all of it, suddenly alert. "You've done this before," he said. Not a question. I nodded, unable to speak, staring at Sawyer's still form. "How many?" 27, I whispered. A slow smile spread across his jaundiced face. "Take me with you." Now. We left through the service exit. I helped him into my car, Dr. Sawyer's access badge in my pocket, her blood still on my shoes. Marcus directed me not to the university library but to an abandoned warehouse at the edge of town. "This isn't where you studied," I said as I helped him from the car. "No." His eyes gleamed in the darkness. "This is where I practiced." The warehouse door opened with a key from his hospital belongings. Inside, the weak beam of my phone flashlight revealed a space meticulously divided by plastic sheeting. Surgical tools arranged on trays. Drains installed in concrete floors. Polaroid photographs tacked to walls. "Before I was a surgeon," Marcus said, his breathing labored but his voice suddenly strong, "I had different interests. Medical school just gave me better techniques." The photographs showed people, unconscious or restrained, subjected to procedures that had nothing to do with healing. "You're not the only one who releases people from suffering, Eleanor." He gestured around the space. 34 of mine. Now you. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He'd never intended to die at the library. He'd researched the hospital staff, identified my pattern, and waited for me to approach him. I wasn't saving him. He was hunting me. "The police will find Dr. Sawyer," I said, backing toward the door. They'll know what happened. Dr. Sawyer is fine. His smile widened. She's been helping me track you for months. We needed confirmation evidence. The blood was theatrical, but effective. As if on cue, car headlights swept across the warehouse windows. Multiple vehicles. You don't understand what I've done, I pleaded. I was helping them. Giving them peace. Were you? Marcus sank into a chair, suddenly looking every bit the dying man he truly was. Or were you collecting them? Capturing their final moments for yourself? 27 private deaths, all witnessed by you alone. That's not. Check your notebook, Eleanor. The one in your bag where you document each death. Tell me, do you ever read it at night? Relive those moments when their lives were entirely in your hands? I couldn't answer. The truth was too horrifying. The warehouse door burst open. Police officers poured in, followed by Dr. Sawyer, very much alive, and Dr. Matthews, whose credentials I'd been using for months. As they handcuffed me, Marcus spoke again, his voice barely audible. We're not so different, you and I. We both took lives that weren't ours to take. I've had a lot of time to think in this cell. About mercy and madness. About the 27 patients whose final moments I orchestrated. About how the road to moral corruption is paved with self-righteous certainty. Was I saving them? Or collecting them, as Marcus suggested? Was I giving them dignity, or stealing their last hours for my own satisfaction? The prosecution says I'm a serial killer. My defense says I was suffering from a messiah complex, a psychological break after years of workplace trauma. But the truth is simpler and more terrifying. I believed I had the right to decide. And once you believe that, there is no line you won't eventually cross. Marcus died 3 days after my arrest. In the hospital. Surrounded by machines, just as he'd planned all along. And sometimes, in the darkest hours of night, I still hear him whispering, "We're not so different, you and I." The worst part is, I'm beginning to think he was right. The first patient died on a Tuesday. Cardiac arrest, the chart said. Unexpected but not suspicious. He was 82 with a history of heart problems. The second died on Friday. Respiratory failure, according to her file. She was only 47 but had advanced COPD. By the third death the following Monday, I knew something was wrong. The patterns were too similar. Sudden deterioration during third shift hours, no staff witnessing the actual moment of death, and all patients had received their evening medications from the medication cart I restocked. I'm Dr. Eliza Chin, third-year resident at Westlake Memorial. Was a third-year resident. Now I'm something else entirely, a witness, a suspect, a pariah. Depends on who you ask. It started with small inconsistencies I noticed during morning rounds. Patients reporting symptoms that didn't match their charts. Lab values that fluctuated wildly between tests. Medications that seemed ineffective despite appropriate dosing. Probably just documentation errors. My attending, Dr. Keller, said when I mentioned it. You know how short-staffed we are. He was right. Westlake served a struggling community on Chicago's South Side. Budget cuts had left us with half the nursing staff we needed and doctors pulling double shifts. Mistakes happened. But these didn't feel like mistakes. Then the deaths began. 3 in 8 days, all on my floor. Administration called it an unfortunate coincidence. I called it a pattern. I started staying late, reviewing charts, looking for connections. The only commonality was me. I had treated all 3 patients. Prescribed their medications. Written their orders. The thought kept me awake at night. Had I made a fatal error I couldn't identify? Then came the anonymous note in my locker. You're looking in the wrong direction. No signature. No explanation. Just that cryptic sentence on hospital stationery. That night, unable to sleep, I returned to the hospital. Not for my shift, just to walk the halls, to think. The night shift was skeletal as usual. 1 nurse for every 15 patients. A single resident covering 3 floors, security dozing at the front desk. I was passing room 412 when I heard voices inside. A male voice, calm, authoritative, and the patient's frightened responses. Ms. Reynolds, admitted yesterday with uncontrolled diabetes. The insulin they're giving you is actually making your condition worse, the male voice was saying. These doctors don't understand how to properly manage your disease. I pushed the door open without knocking. Ms. Reynolds was sitting up in bed. Beside her stood a man in blue scrubs and a white coat, holding a syringe. I'd never seen him before. Who are you? I demanded. He turned slowly, unsurprised by my entrance. Dr. Wesley Burke. Endocrinology consult. His ID badge hung from his coat pocket. It looked legitimate from a distance. I didn't order an endocrinology consult, I said, stepping closer. Especially not at 2 a.m. Dr. Keller did, he replied smoothly, tucking the syringe into his pocket. If you'll excuse me, we were just finishing up. Ms. Reynolds looked between us, confused. Is something wrong? Everything's fine, the man assured her, patting her hand. Remember what I said about your medication. I'll check on you tomorrow. He walked past me with a confident nod. I should have stopped him, demanded to see his credentials, called security. Instead, I let him go, too shocked by his audacity. I immediately checked Ms. Reynolds for a line. The bag hadn't been tampered with, at least not visibly. What did he tell you? I asked her. That the insulin protocol you put me on would damage my kidneys. He gave me something to protect them. She frowned. Isn't he with the hospital? I called security, but by then, Dr. Burke was gone. I ordered new blood work for Ms. Reynolds and checked on every patient on the floor. Everyone was stable, for now. The next morning, I reported the incident to administration. They reviewed security footage, but the cameras near room 412 had malfunctioned that night. The head of security suggested it might have been a real doctor I simply hadn't met yet. The hospital employed hundreds of physicians, after all. But there was no Dr. Wesley Burke on staff. His name wasn't in any medical directory in the state. The ID badge he'd worn was reported missing 3 months earlier. When Ms. Reynolds' lab results came back that afternoon, her glucose levels were perfect. Better than they'd been since admission. Whatever Dr. Burke had given her had worked. I spent that night reviewing camera footage from previous weeks, searching for glimpses of the imposter. The security office was understaffed like everything else, the guard happy to let a doctor use the system while he took his break. In fragments, across dozens of recordings, I found him. Always at night. Always moving with purpose. Sometimes in scrubs, sometimes in a white coat, occasionally in a suit with an administrative badge. He blended in perfectly, just another harried healthcare worker in a busy hospital. Over 3 weeks, I documented him entering 17 patient rooms. I cross-referenced with patient records. 4 had died. 6 had recovered faster than expected and been discharged. 7 showed no change in their condition. There was no obvious pattern to which patients he targeted, different ages, conditions, prognosis. My next shift, I checked the medication records. Small discrepancies appeared throughout, doses that didn't match my orders, medications administered at unusual times. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger alerts, just enough to subtly alter treatment plans. I went to Dr. Keller with my findings. He listened patiently, then sighed. Eliza, you're overworked. We all are. But seeing conspiracies. It's not a conspiracy, I insisted. Someone is interfering with patient care. People have died. People die in hospitals every day, he reminded me gently. Sometimes despite our best efforts, sometimes because of normal complications, sometimes because we make mistakes. His words hit like a slap. You think I'm making mistakes? That these deaths are my fault? I think you're exhausted and looking for explanations beyond the obvious, he said. Take a few days off. Please. I didn't take days off. Instead, I started sleeping at the hospital, catnaps in on-call rooms, always keeping my pager close. I volunteered for night shifts, extra weekends. I needed to catch Dr. Burke. In the act, with witnesses and functioning cameras. 2 weeks passed without a sighting. Patient outcomes stabilized. The mysterious deaths stopped. I began to wonder if Dr. Keller was right. Had exhaustion been making me paranoid? Then came another note in my locker. Meet me in the old pediatric wing. Midnight. Come alone if you want answers. The pediatric department had relocated to the new building last year. The old wing was partially renovated, used mainly for storage until funding came through to complete construction. It was deserted at night, separated from the active hospital by a long corridor of administrative offices. I knew it was reckless to go alone, but who would believe me? I took a scalpel from a supply cabinet, not much protection, but better than nothing, and made my way to the abandoned wing at midnight. The pediatric floor was eerily silent, ceiling panels removed, exposed wiring hanging like strange fruits. Construction equipment gathered dust in corners. My footsteps echoed on the bare concrete floor. A single examination room had light spilling from beneath its door. I approached cautiously, scalpel gripped in my sweating palm. He was waiting inside, seated calmly at a desk that hadn't been removed during renovation. No white coat tonight, just dark slacks and a blue button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. A stethoscope hung around his neck. Dr. Chin, he said pleasantly. Thank you for coming. Who are you? I kept my distance, cataloging his features, mid-40s, prematurely gray hair, wire-framed glasses, the confident posture of someone used to being respected. You already know my name, he replied. Wesley Burke. Though that's not the name I practiced under. You're not a doctor. He smiled thinly. I was. For 17 years. Until they decided I wasn't fit to practice anymore. On the desk beside him lay several patient charts, actual paper charts, not electronic records, neatly stacked and labeled. These people died because of your hospital's negligence, he said, tapping the stack. All within the past year. All preventable with proper care. So you're what? Getting revenge by killing more patients? My voice shook with anger. I haven't killed anyone, Dr. Chin. I've saved them. His voice was calm, reasonable. The 4 patients who died under your care were terminal before I intervened. Their deaths were merciful releases from suffering that your treatments were prolonging. And the others? Simple corrections to dangerously flawed treatment plans. Like Ms. Reynolds' insulin protocol, it was aggravating her kidney dysfunction. I adjusted it. You had no right, I whispered. I had every right, he countered. I took an oath, same as you. Do no harm. When I see harm being done, I intervene. You lost your license. There must be a reason. Something flickered in his eyes, a momentary crack in his composure. Politics. Hospital economics. The ethics committee didn't appreciate my methods. What methods? He waved dismissively. Experimental treatments. Aggressive interventions. I saved lives that the establishment had written off as hopeless. But they couldn't tolerate the occasional failure. How many failures? Acceptable losses in a greater mission. He leaned forward. I've been watching you, Dr. Chen. You're different from the others. You notice things. You care beyond the paperwork. You could understand my work. Your work is criminal. I said. You're going to prison. For what? Impersonating a physician? A misdemeanor at best. He smiled again. And who would testify? The patients I've saved? The hospital that would face massive liability once my corrections to their substandard care became public? He was right. It would be his word against mine, and I had no proof that wouldn't also implicate the hospital in systematic failures. Why tell me this? Why not just continue your corrections? Because I'm offering you a choice, he said. Join me. Learn how medicine should really be practiced, free from bureaucracy and pharmaceutical influence. Or continue being part of a broken system. I stared at him, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. You didn't just arrive here randomly. You targeted this hospital. You targeted me. Your mother died at Lakeside General 3 years ago. Sepsis from a mismanaged post-operative infection. His voice softened with practiced empathy. You became a doctor to prevent others from suffering the same fate. How's that working within the system? The mention of my mother hit like a physical blow. He'd researched me, found my vulnerability, my motivation. I'm nothing like you, I said. Not yet. He stood, gathering the charts. But you could be. You have the same fire, the same disillusionment growing inside you. I recognize it because I lived it. You're delusional. Perhaps. But I've saved more lives in the past month than you will all year following protocols designed by insurance companies. He moved toward a back door I hadn't noticed. Think about my offer. When you're ready, you'll find me. I'm going to report this conversation. I warned. Security will be waiting for you if you return. He paused at the door. Like they were waiting tonight? His smile was pitying now. I've worked at this hospital longer than you have, Dr. Chin. Just not officially. After he left, I discovered the truth of his words. The security cameras for the entire wing had been disabled. The night guard had no record of either of us entering the area. The back door led to a service corridor with an exit not covered by external cameras. I reported everything to administration the next morning. They increased security temporarily, changed some access codes, reminded staff to wear visible ID badges at all times. Superficial measures against the systemic infiltration. I requested transfer to another hospital. They gladly approved it. I'd become an inconvenience, pointing out flaws they couldn't afford to fix. My last day at Westlake, I found a final note. Congratulations on your new position at Lakeside General. Your mother's case file is in your bottom desk drawer. See what really happened. Then decide. The file was there. I haven't opened it yet. But some nights, walking the halls of my new hospital, I find myself noticing things. Inconsistent charting. Questionable treatment plans. Patients recovering unexpectedly after night shifts. And sometimes, just at the edge of my vision, I glimpse a figure in a white coat turning a corner. A figure with gray hair and wire-framed glasses. Watching. Waiting. For me to decide. I found Dr. Mercer in the supply closet on my third night shift. He stood perfectly still in the darkness, staring at the wall, his white coat unblemished despite the dust that coated every surface. When I flipped on the light, he didn't startle or turn, just slowly lowered his hand from where it rested against the plaster. Dr. Rollins, he acknowledged with a nod, as though finding a senior surgeon in a disused closet at 3 a.m. was perfectly normal. Late night? Just looking for extra gauze, I said, though we both knew this closet had been officially emptied months ago when the hospital's east wing underwent renovation. I'd only opened it hoping for a moment of quiet during a chaotic shift. You won't find much here, he replied, brushing past me. Try the 4th floor. As he left, I noticed his shoes were caked with a reddish-brown mud. Strange, given that it hadn't rained in weeks. I should have forgotten about it. Should have returned to my patients and the mounting paperwork. But something about the scene lingered. His stillness, the mud, the way his fingers had traced patterns on the old plaster. I ran my hand over the wall where he'd been touching. Nothing unusual, just peeling paint and ancient brick beneath. But as I pressed harder, following the same circular motion I'd seen him make, a section of the wall shifted almost imperceptibly. Let me be clear. Westbrook Memorial is not a new hospital. It was built in 1923 and has undergone dozens of renovations, expansions, and retrofits since then. The result is a labyrinthine complex where even veteran staff sometimes take wrong turns. Sections built in different eras connect awkwardly. Doorways lead to unexpected places. Entire corridors sit abandoned after department relocations. So finding a hidden door wasn't entirely shocking. Older buildings have sealed spaces, forgotten passages between wings, maintenance channels nobody uses anymore. What shocked me was that it had been deliberately concealed, not just boarded up or locked, but hidden behind a false wall designed to look continuous with the rest. It took me 15 minutes of careful pressure to figure out the release mechanism, a simple pivot point that caused the section to swing inward silently, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. I should have reported it immediately. Should have called security or maintenance. Instead, I took out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped through. The staircase was concrete, utilitarian, spiraling downward at a steep angle. The air grew colder with each step, carrying a musty, medicinal smell I couldn't place. After one complete spiral, I reached a landing with a metal door marked simply L1. Lower 1. We had a basement level, maintenance, storage, mechanicals, but it was labeled B, not L. I'd never seen an L designation anywhere in the hospital's floor plans. The door was unlocked. It swung open to reveal a corridor that looked like an older version of our main floors. Mint green tiled walls, speckled linoleum floors, fluorescent lights that flickered intermittently. But everything was scaled down, narrower, with a lower ceiling that forced me to duck slightly. Rooms lined both sides, each with a small, wire-reinforced window in the door. Patient rooms, but smaller than our standard size, with outdated equipment still in place. Ancient-looking monitors. 4 stands from decades past. Beds with manual cranks instead of electronic controls. Each room was clean, not dusty as I'd expected for an abandoned space, but empty of patients. In one, I found a clipboard with patient notes, dated 3 days earlier. Patient shows marked improvement following procedure. Resistance significantly decreased. Recommend continued observation. The handwriting was Dr. Mercer's. I'd seen it enough on consult requests to recognize the distinctive slant of his letters. But the terminology was odd. Resistance wasn't a standard metric we tracked. And what procedure? The notes didn't specify. At the end of the corridor was another staircase leading down to a door marked L2. And beyond that, L3. Each level identical in layout but showing subtle changes in equipment, older as I descended, like walking backward through the hospital's history. On L3, I found patients. The first room contained a woman in her 40s, sleeping or unconscious, connected to monitoring equipment I barely recognized, analog dials and paper readouts instead of digital displays. An 4 bag contained a cloudy solution I didn't recognize. The fluid pulsed with a faint luminescence under the fluorescent lights, probably from some interaction with the plastic tubing. I checked her chart. Denise Miller, 43, admitted through the ER 6 weeks ago with late-stage pancreatic cancer that had metastasized to her liver and lungs. Terminal, with weeks to live. But the notes, again in Mercer's handwriting, documented significant tumor reduction and unexpected cellular regeneration. I checked the next room. Thomas Chin, 67, catastrophic stroke, unresponsive to conventional treatment. His chart showed steady improvement over 4 weeks. Room after room told the same story, patients with supposedly terminal or untreatable conditions showing remarkable recoveries. All under Mercer's care. All in this hidden ward no one was supposed to know about. In the final room, instead of a patient, I found a small laboratory. Modern equipment here, centrifuges, microscopes, refrigerated storage units, alongside things I didn't recognize. Glass containers bubbled with various solutions. Notebooks filled shelves along one wall. I opened one at random. Page after page of dense technical writing, chemical formulas, treatment protocols that veered sharply from standard medical practice. Treatments using compounds I'd never encountered in medical school. Dosages that seemed impossibly high. Combinations that should have been lethal. I was still reading when the lights flickered and died, plunging the lab into darkness. My phone flashlight revealed nothing amiss, but the sudden silence was oppressive. The background hum of equipment had stopped. "You shouldn't be here, Dr. Rollins." Dr. Mercer stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim emergency lights that had activated in the corridor. He didn't sound angry, just tired. "What is this place?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "These patients, they're supposed to be dead." Chen was taken to the morgue 3 weeks ago. I signed his death certificate. Did you check the body? Mercer asked mildly. Or did you just sign the paperwork like everyone else? I hadn't checked. The ER had called the time of death. I'd signed the administrative forms hours later. What have you done? I've continued my work, he said, stepping into the room. Work the hospital board deemed excessive, dangerous, and unethical 20 years ago when they shut down my research and stripped me of my department. 20 years ago, Mercer would have been in his early 30s, a brilliant researcher from what I'd heard, pioneering experimental treatments for terminal conditions. They built over the original research wing, he continued, buried it beneath the new cardiac center, but they never actually demolished it. Too expensive to remove all that reinforced concrete. Easier to seal it off and pretend it never existed. Like they did with my research. These patients are alive because of me, he finished. Miller had weeks to live. Chen was brain dead. Harrison in room 4 had inoperable glioblastoma. Shall I continue? You falsified death certificates. You took patients without consent. I took patients who had no options left, he corrected. Patients your medicine had failed. And I didn't need to falsify anything. This hospital's bureaucracy does that all by itself. Bodies go missing. Paperwork gets filed without verification. The system is so broken that a determined person can move through its cracks like a ghost. What are you giving them? I gestured to the notebooks. These treatments aren't approved. These compounds are effective, he interrupted. More effective than anything available upstairs. I've had 20 years to perfect them while conventional medicine continues its plodding, incremental improvements. Something in his certainty chilled me more than the bizarre hidden facility. The absolute conviction of a man who had spent 2 decades working in isolation, answering to no ethics committee, no review board, no colleagues. How many patients have died down here? I asked quietly. His expression hardened. How many die upstairs every day because established protocols value caution over innovation? How many die because treatments that could save them are still 5 years away from approval? That's not an answer. Early attempts had higher failure rates, he admitted. But each provided valuable data. Nothing was wasted. I thought of the mud on his shoes. The hospital was built on reclaimed marshland at the edge of town. Soft ground that would be easy to dig in. You've been burying them on the grounds, I whispered. He didn't deny it. When necessary. The successes far outnumber the failures now. I'm reporting this, I said, moving toward the door. All of it. To whom? He asked calmly. The administration that would face catastrophic lawsuits if this became public? The board members who originally approved my research before burying it? Or perhaps the police, who would need to explain how bodies went missing from the morgue without anyone noticing? He was right. Everyone implicated would deny knowledge. Evidence would disappear. I'd be the hysterical young doctor making outlandish claims about secret underground facilities. Why show me this? I asked. Why risk letting me find that entrance? Because I'm dying, Dr. Rollins. He said it matter-of-factly. Pancreatic cancer, like Miller. The irony isn't lost on me. But my treatments. He gestured around the lab. They require administration by someone who understands them. Someone who can continue refining them. You want me to take over your illegal human experimentation? I couldn't keep the horror from my voice. I want you to save lives that can't be saved upstairs. He stepped aside, clearing the path to the door. You've seen my results. Think about it. The entrance will remain accessible to you, should you decide to return. I pushed past him, heart pounding, and didn't stop running until I reached the main floor, emerging from the supply closet into the fluorescent normality of the hospital corridor. A nurse gave me a strange look but said nothing. My shift ended at 7 a.m. I drove home in a daze, telling myself I would report everything after getting some sleep. But each time I rehearsed the conversation in my head, it sounded more delusional. I returned to work the next night. The supply closet looked undisturbed, But the hidden door opened at my touch, the passage still there, still leading downward to those secret floors. I didn't descend. 3 days later, Dr. Mercer didn't show up for his shift. Hospital administration sent a brief email stating he had taken medical leave for personal reasons. No further details provided. A week after that, I received an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single key labeled L5, and a piece of paper with an address, a storage facility across town, and the code to a lockbox containing, I discovered, 27 notebooks filled with Mercer's research. I haven't gone back to the lower floors, but I've read every notebook. Twice. The treatments he developed aren't just effective, they're revolutionary. Compounds that repair neural damage. Protocols that reverse cellular deterioration. Methods that could save thousands of patients we currently send to hospice with. Comfort measures only. Yesterday, I treated a 6-year-old girl with an aggressive form of leukemia that isn't responding to conventional therapy. Her parents wept as I explained we were running out of options. Standard protocol gives her 3 months. 6 with experimental treatments that will make her final months miserable. Last night, I dreamed of lower floors stretching endlessly downward, and patients walking back up into the light. This morning I found mud on my shoes, though I don't remember walking through any construction areas. The key to L5 sits on my desk as I write this. I became a doctor to save lives. How many could I save with what's in those notebooks? With what waits on the lower floors? And if some don't survive the treatments, well, the ground around Westbrook Memorial is soft and rarely disturbed. I have rounds in an hour. The little girl with leukemia is my first patient. I need to decide what kind of doctor I really am. Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.